Welcome back to Dark Night Mysteries. Tonight's episode contains accounts of violence, including graphic descriptions of physical attacks and their aftermath. Some listeners may find this disturbing. Listener discretion is strongly advised. And as always, if I miss something or if you feel like there's more to add to today's case, please do not hesitate to reach out. We are all here to learn, remember, and reflect together. So, grab a cup of whatever keeps you grounded, maybe something warm and calming, while I pour myself some coffee, and let's dive into tonight's episode. The final chase, the capture of Richard Ramirez.
I ran into a situation that was very precarious. If you do something so many times, it's bound to happen wrong sometimes. To apprehend the killer's serious mainly being a mistake by the killer or a stroke of luck by the police. Either that or they need to get inside the mind of a serial killer.
The Night Stalker, a name that struck fear into the hearts of millions. A man whose reign of terror across Southern California had left the streets soaked in fear. For over a year, he had evaded capture, slipping through the cracks in the investigation, taunting law enforcement and the public alike. But every predator eventually slips up. Every killer makes a mistake. By the summer of 1985, the search for Richard Ramirez had reached a fever pitch. Southern California was boiling over with tension. Authorities had combed through mountains of evidence, witness statements, fingerprints, even surveillance footage. But the Night Stalker had remained elusive. Richard Ramirez had cast a long, terrifying shadow over the state for over a year. That would soon change in the most unexpected way. The randomness of his crime, the brutality of them, had left no one feeling safe. He had crossed age, gender, race, and class lines. He struck in wealthy suburbs and working class neighborhoods alike. Every household was a potential target. And for law enforcement, the pressure was suffocating. Multiple jurisdictions were involved. LAPD, the Sheriff's Department, San Francisco PD, all racing against time. Each crime scene had brought new horror, more frustration. There were no fingerprints. There were only shoe prints, even eyewitness sketches, but no arrests. And worst of all, no pattern that they could count on. He had vanished as easily as he had appeared. Until in a sudden twist, the case broke wide open because of something that Richard Ramirez had always taken for granted: his own face. On August 30th, 1985, Richard Ramirez had made a fateful decision. After committing another brutal attack in San Francisco, he had headed south towards Los Angeles, just as he had done countless of times before. But this time, his face would forever be etched into the public consciousness. This time, it would mark the beginning of the end. That same morning, authorities had held a press conference and released a mugshot of Richard Ramirez from a prior arrest. Within hours, that photo was everywhere, on televisions, in newspapers, even posted in corner markets across the city. There was no more hiding in the shadows. The public had finally had a face to match the nightmare. And what no one knew was that Richard Ramirez wasn't even in LA that day. He was in Arizona visiting his brother. Authorities had released a composite sketch of the Night Stalker along with the mugshot, but these photos weren't just a drawing and a stock prison photo. They were a map to his identity, and they had been broadcast across California on every television and printed in every newspaper. When fate intervened, Ramirez had just gotten off that Greyhound bus from Arizona, where he had traveled to go visit one of his brothers, possibly laying low while police had closed in. He had stepped off the bus, completely unaware that the city now knew exactly who he was. After arriving at the bus station, he had walked past several police officers who were tasked specifically with looking for the Night Stalker. According to Gil Carrillo, Richard knew instantly that they were cops, so he left as quickly as he could without drawing any attention. Here's what Gil had to say.
We're looking for Richard to come in the outside. Richard came inside through the back door, through where passengers enter. He recognized cops right away because cops wear ugly clothing, wear dirty clothing, but their teeth are clean, they don't smell bad, and their hair is clean.
He doesn't know it's specifically for him, but he makes them. So he walks out the exit out onto the street, walks down the block, and he goes into a liquor store, and on the front page of every newspaper is this picture.
After leaving the Greyhound station, he then entered a convenience store and browsed the aisles before seeing something that stopped him in his tracks. His face was plastered in the newspaper La Opinion with a headline calling him the Night Invader. A group of residents who had seen his face on the news just hours before had recognized him immediately. The cold, unforgettable features that they had seen terrorizing their community were now standing just right in front of them. He had walked into a convenience store for a snack, just another grimy morning in LA, but that was when reality hit.
Yeah, you look at the picture of the newspaper. He looks really scared, you know.
He sees that and he panics.
Walked out of there real quick, got on a bus.
Ramirez had reportedly muttered something before fleeing the store, like, "That's me." A woman inside had recognized him and shouted, "El Matador! The killer!" And now people had began to gather. Then the chase began. What happened next was unlike anything else in American criminal history. In a neighborhood that had been terrorized for 14 months, people were no longer running away. They were going to chase him. And almost an entire neighborhood had sprang into action. Fear had gave way to fury. The people of East Los Angeles were no longer willing to live in terror. They knew that if they didn't act, Ramirez might disappear into the shadows once again.
And the chase was on.
He's being tracked by people calling in. He runs into the I-5 freeway.
And ran across all lanes of the freeway.
One resident, Elise Cabral, had told the LA Times in 1985 that the neighborhood was just waiting for an opportunity like this. She said, quote, "We were saying that if he got caught around here in East LA, he'd probably get his butt beat up because all of the guys around here know about him. They would just love to get their hands on him. And now we wake up the next morning and find him across the street." As Ramirez had bolted down the street, he realized that the jig was up. Multiple residents joined into the pursuit. Someone was on a bike, someone else in a pickup, others were on foot. A teenage boy even followed him across several blocks, shouting to alert more neighbors. Ramirez had tried to steal a car, but the driver resisted. He had ran through backyards, over fences, desperate, sweaty, slipping. He was no longer the predator. He was the prey. He ran, weaving through streets, dodging cars, over freeways, desperate to escape. He even tried to carjack another vehicle, but the driver had fought him off. The chaos had escalated, and the desperation in Ramirez's eyes was clear. He was losing control. The crowd cornered him. They struck him hard enough to open wounds that would later require his entire head to be bandaged. At one point, Ramirez had sat down, gasping for air, hoping to regain just enough strength to flee again, until he spotted the car coming down the road. One man had struck him with a metal bar. Another tried to hold him down. A group surrounded him, punching, kicking, raw justice from people who were done living in fear. By the time that police arrived, Richard was bruised, bloody, and begging for protection. He had made one more attempt to escape through an alley, but by then the police had already arrived. He eventually thanked the two officers for rescuing him from the crowd, even though he knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that his freedom had slipped away. An LAPD patrol officer had pulled him from the crowd and placed him in handcuffs. Ramirez's head was bleeding profusely. Some witnesses said that he had just sat on the curb, panting and muttering. He was stunned, more by the fury of the people than the actual arrest. He thought that he could just vanish again, but his luck and his mask were gone.
And tried to carjack one gentleman.
Fausto Pignon wrestled with Ramirez as the suspect tried to steal his car.
Couldn't get the car out.
When he couldn't do that, he ran across the street.
And turned right on Hubbard Street.
Give me the keys, give me the keys. And then I looked up at his face and I saw his eyes, and then I recognized that he was the one who killed.
In Spanish, he hollered to give him the keys or he would kill me.
That's when Manuel de la Torre got involved. Manuel ran out front.
He got a metal stick from right there from the gate, hit him in the head.
I gave him one by the car, the man fell, he started running away, I chased him, and I gave him another hit.
All the neighbors chased him down the street.
You know, I said, oh my God, that's the guy.
The guy with the bar was telling his wife to go get him, so he shoot me. I didn't give a fuck at that point. I was so fucking tired. I looked down the street and I saw a sheriff's patrol car coming down the street.
Call came out. 22, 415, possible fight, possible man with a gun. I could see maybe 3 or 4 people on one side of the street. The closer I got, I could see they were moving around, they're yelling, they're waving around, screaming, and I could see one person sitting on the sidewalk.
He said something in Spanish about, I'm lucky the cops are coming or something. Because he knew everybody was gonna finish.
All the neighbors just hung together and got him.
There's one guy holding him at bay with his metal bar. I could tell that he had been hit.
The crowd had detained him, had beat him, he had blood on his head, on his hands, on his shirt. He was tired of running. He was really exhausted.
I just told him to stand up. He stood up. I handcuffed him. And I put him in the police car in the back seat.
And takes him into custody.
The crowd was getting bigger, they were getting louder.
They were starting to circle, getting closer and closer, pointing to a newspaper, and I could even hear people saying, "Ese es el matón, the killer, let's get him, yeah, let's get him." And I'm like, oh no, I gotta control this.
Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, was finally in custody. In a rare interview, Ramirez would later describe in his own chilling words what it felt like to be hunted that day.
I was just really pissed off at the way things had turned out, that I was under arrest now. And I turned at all the people that are around me, and I spit at them, I pulled my tongue out at them. I stuck it in and out, like a serpent. And if I hadn't had a pistol, How we made them scatter. They wouldn't be as great as they thought they were.
You're the rest people.
Hey, where's your car?
What's up? How long ago? What's your name? Huh? What's your name?
But no matter what he believed, there was going to be no escape this time.
I get notified they've got him in custody. I am so excited. I can't wait to get there. And we hauled. I mean, we were flying. And when I got to Hollenbeck Station, a lot of people around the station.
The entire Hollenbeck police station was surrounded with citizens.
Ramirez had finally been arrested. The Night Stalker, the man who had terrorized the entire state, was now in custody, and the streets of Los Angeles could finally breathe again, right? News of the arrest had spread like wildfire. Local channels cut programming. Reporters swarmed the neighborhood. Crowds gathered outside the LAPD headquarters, chanting and cheering and showing their breasts. Even the neighborhood's mayor had spoke to the press, expressing his pride in the residents who had courageously brought Ramirez down. But though the reign of terror was over, the long road to justice was only beginning. For many, this wasn't just an arrest, it was a reclaiming of their community. But inside the police station, the mood was somber. Detectives had seen what he had done. The photos, the autopsy reports, the children, the victims. The quiet aftermaths. And now the man responsible was sitting right there. He was smirking, even after he had just thrown up a bright green mess on the ground. For the families of Richard Ramirez's victims, that pain would never fade. For the survivors, those who had endured unimaginable horror, the scars would last a lifetime. Richard's capture didn't bring closure. It didn't rewind time. Their grief and the survivors' suffering couldn't be erased by an arrest, but justice had at least taken its first step. The manhunt for Richard Ramirez had lasted more than a year, 14 months. It had taken the entire community to bring him down. 200 police, 4 jurisdictions over the LA County and surrounding areas. The Night Stalker was no longer just a name in the headlines. He was a man, one who could finally be forced to answer for his crimes, and that list was staggering. It would only grow as investigators had connected his fingerprints and his shoe prints to additional crimes. But questions had remained. Would justice truly be served? Would the court understand the full extent of his evil? Or would this trial become just another dark chapter in his saga? But all of that, his attitude, the trial, the headlines, that was still to come. For now, there was one thing that the public could cling to. He was off the streets, and he could not keep them in fear any longer. Some of the victims, or their families, had actually attended the arraignment. Others stayed away, unable to see him. One mother, speaking to reporters outside the courthouse, had said, "He might be behind bars, but my daughter is still gone. Nothing is going to bring her back." Another quietly said, "He didn't just take lives, he shattered families." His arrest was the end of a nightmare, but not the end of pain. Justice would have its day, but for the families, that justice would never mean wholeness. In the next episode, I'm going to take you into that courtroom. The trial of Richard Ramirez would be one of the most expensive and, to tell you the truth, bizarre in all of California history. We're going to examine his chilling courtroom behavior and his disturbing fan base and the chaotic way that it had all ended. Ramirez didn't just stand trial, he reveled in it. He even growled in the trial saying, "You maggots make me sick," and Lucifer is within all of us. In the cold, clinical air of the courtroom, Ramirez would reveal something even darker than his crimes. He would reveal a man who had embraced his evil and wore it like a crown. His chilling lack of remorse. We'll hear Ramirez speak for himself, what he said, what he didn't say, and the legacy of evil that he had never once tried to hide. Stay with us as Dark Knight Mysteries continues with Episode 4, The Devil in the Courtroom, where we delve deeper into the mind of the Night Stalker and explore chilling aftermath of his capture. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay safe. You never know who might be watching.